It was the sound of laughter that broke her heart. Loud, unapologetic laughter echoing from the living room, his laughter, and another woman's voice, silky and amused. Aisha stood in the hallway, clutching the tray of freshly made pepper soup like a lifeline. She had spent hours in the kitchen, wearing the apron that still read his queen. But in that moment, she felt anything but royal. Aisha had always been fuller-bodied, curvy with rich brown skin and a soft presence that radiated warmth. When she married Tand, he told her she was beautiful, divine, made just for him. But marriage had not remained the dream she thought it would be. 2 children and 5 years later, Tand began changing. The compliments stopped. The dates became rare. And then the insults came, subtle at first, wrapped in sarcasm, then sharper, louder. That day, everything changed. Tand didn't even flinch when Aisha walked in with the tray. He had his arm draped around a slender, giggling woman in a red gown whose legs stretched out like a runway model's. Her name was Pamela. Aisha would never forget that name. "You should try dressing like her," Tand muttered, not even looking at his wife. "Or maybe try putting down the fufu sometimes." The words felt like a slap. Aisha's fingers trembled. She placed the tray down, trying to blink back tears. But it was the kiss that followed, Tand pulling Pamela close, kissing her full on the lips right there in front of her, that shattered everything. Pamela glanced at Aisha smugly. "Sorry, love. Maybe if you put as much effort into yourself as you do into cooking." Aisha fled the room. That night, she didn't sleep. Her pillow soaked in silent sobs, heart bruised, dignity stripped. But beneath the pain, a seed was planted. It didn't bloom with anger at first, only with clarity. "This is what he thinks of me." The next morning, Tand was gone, he didn't even leave a note. Just took a few clothes and disappeared like love had an expiry date. Aisha sat alone in the quiet, staring into the mirror. She saw more than a heavy woman. She saw a woman who had forgotten herself. Forgotten her worth. Her strength. Her name. And that's when she made the decision. She would not let Tand's cruelty define her. She would not drown in his rejection. She would rise. Not to win him back, but to become a version of herself he would never deserve. She picked up her journal and began to write 3 words that would become her vow. Aisha didn't start with the gym or some miracle diet. She began with something deeper, her spirit. For the first time in years, she turned off the world and listened to herself. The pain had burned her, yes, but it also awakened a part of her that had long been buried under motherhood, marriage, and mockery. She enrolled in therapy at a women's center in Ibadan. Her first session was full of silence, but slowly, Aisha began to speak. Her words came out shaky at first, then steady. With each confession, she peeled back the shame, layer by layer, like dead skin. Meanwhile, she changed how she ate. Not to please anyone, but to heal. She learned about nutrition. Cooked for herself like she mattered. She joined a local fitness group in the early mornings, mostly older women trying to stay active. They didn't mock her. They clapped when she ran. They cheered when she sweated. They reminded her she was seen. And the weight began to fall. 10 kilograms. Then 15. But what changed more than her body was her confidence. She began dressing differently, not revealing, but bold. Prints that danced with color. Head wraps that matched her glow. When she walked into the market, heads turned, not because she was thin, but because she walked like a woman who remembered who she was. Tand didn't call. Not once. She knew he had moved in with Pamela in Lekki. Mutual friends whispered that they flaunted their relationship on social media. Aisha didn't check. She didn't need to. But fate, as always, spins its own wheel. One rainy Friday evening, she was invited to speak at a women's empowerment event in Lagos. She had become a quiet inspiration in her community, a woman who had turned heartbreak into transformation. She wore a gold ochre dress that hugged her new frame, not to show off, but to embrace every inch of her story. Backstage, she breathed deeply, steadying herself before stepping out. That's when she saw him. Turned. In the crowd. He looked shocked, like he had seen a ghost. His mouth hung open slightly, as if the woman before him wasn't the same one he had once mocked. He was heavier now, with stress written across his forehead. Next to him stood Pamela, scrolling her phone, disinterested. Aisha smiled faintly and turned away. She had a speech to give. A life to live. But the story wasn't over. Because Tand would not stay silent after seeing her like that. No, he would reach out. He would text. He would call. He would remember. And she was ready for that. Not to fall again. But to finish what had been started. Because sometimes, revenge isn't about hurting back, it's about showing them what they lost. Tan's message came at exactly 2:14 a.m. Aisha. I saw you. You look amazing. Can we talk? I miss you. She stared at the message for several minutes, the blue glow of her phone lighting up her bedroom. There was no flutter in her chest, no rush of emotions. Just stillness. He had once made her cry herself to sleep. Now, he was crawling back. She didn't reply. The next morning, more messages followed. I made mistakes. You were always the best thing that happened to me. Pamela is not what I thought she was. She's cold, fake. I miss how real you were. Aisha didn't respond. Not because she hadn't already decided, but because she knew silence was more powerful than pity. She didn't need closure. He did. But that week, at her workplace, he showed up. It was after her teaching session at the Community Women's Center. The rain was light, drizzling gently on the roof as women filed out with laughter and thank yous. Then, from behind the tree near the gate, he emerged, umbrella in hand, wearing that sheepish expression he used to wear when he forgot her birthday. Aisha, please, he said, stepping in front of her. Just give me 5 minutes. She considered walking past. But then she remembered that sometimes the people who broke you need to see that they no longer can. She nodded once. 5 minutes. They sat at a nearby bench. He tried to be charming, apologetic. He blamed work, stress, temptation. Claimed he was confused, that Pamela never understood him the way Aisha did. I've changed, he insisted. And you've transformed. You look incredible, but it's not just that. You have this fire now. I miss us. Aisha chuckled softly, not out of humor, but because of how blind he still was. Tand, you didn't leave because I changed, she said. You left because you never saw me. You saw a woman you thought would never rise. And now that I have, you think you can just walk back into my life. He blinked, surprised. I didn't lose weight for you. I did it for me. I healed for me. And I'd rather walk alone than let someone like you walk beside me again. He looked down, ashamed. But Aisha wasn't finished. You kissed another woman in front of me. And now you think sweet words will erase that. He had no answer. She stood up. This isn't a love story, Tand. This is a story about resurrection. Mine. And with that, she walked away, head high, past the man who once made her feel small. But the real twist was yet to come. Because Aisha wasn't done inspiring others, or changing lives. And someone was watching her journey very closely. Someone powerful, with a plan. The video of Aisha's speech at the Lagos Empowerment event had quietly gone viral. Not for her outfit. Not for the dramatic story of betrayal. But for her calm power, her message about reclaiming self-worth in a world that conditions women to measure themselves by how desirable they are to men. Within weeks, her inbox was flooded with messages from women across Africa, young girls, single mothers, even elderly widows, who saw themselves in her pain in her rise. A popular Ghanaian talk show host, Madam Delali, reached out, inviting her to share her story on national television. Aisha didn't hesitate. She appeared on the show wearing a sky blue bubu with white embroidery, her natural hair crowned like a halo. She spoke clearly, confidently, about her journey, her heartbreak, and the strength it took to find her way back to herself. "I was taught to believe that being a wife meant sacrificing yourself," she said. "But now I know, love should never cost your identity." The studio audience erupted in applause. Behind the cameras, in a sleek suit, stood Kola Adiwale, a well-known investor and founder of a prominent NGO supporting women entrepreneurs. He had watched her segment with quiet admiration. There was something about her, the way she carried pain like a medal and wisdom like armor. After the show, he introduced himself. "I believe you're more than a survivor," he said. "You're a leader. I want to fund a project under your name. A safe space for women to heal. Train. Rebuild." Aisha was stunned. The seed she had planted in pain was now blossoming into something far greater than personal revenge. It was becoming a revolution. Together, they launched Rise Again Women's Network. Aisha trained others in emotional healing, basic business skills, fitness, and self-defense. What started with one community hall grew into 3 locations across Oyo State. Tand, meanwhile, had faded into quiet bitterness. Pamela had left him. His business had failed. He watched Aisha's rise on the news with disbelief. The woman he had mocked had become a national symbol of resilience. And one day, as fate would have it, their paths crossed again, at the airport. Aisha was on her way to Nairobi for a Pan-African Women's Summit. He was picking up a relative. He saw her across the terminal, radiant, surrounded by her team. She didn't notice him. And even if she had, he no longer mattered. He turned away, heart heavy. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't cruelty, it's success. Growth. Peace. That night, in her hotel room in Kenya, Aisha looked at her reflection. Not to check for flaws, but to celebrate the woman staring back. She had been broken. But she chose to rebuild, brick by brick, breath by breath. And her story wasn't over yet. Because healing is not the end, it's the beginning. The Nairobi summit was more than an event, it was a global stage. Ministers, activists, scholars, and change-makers had gathered, but it was Aisha's keynote address that silenced the crowd. Her voice rang out through the grand hall with unwavering conviction. "I was once told that I was not enough. Too fat. Too slow. Too weak. But I have learned," she said, pausing as the audience leaned in, "that the only voice that should define a woman is her own." Her story, once buried in shame, was now a torch lighting the paths of countless others. And in the crowd was a young girl from Tanzania named Nuru, who had tried to take her own life the year before after her father called her useless for gaining weight. But hearing Aisha speak, it saved her. That was the ripple effect of healing, silent lives reclaimed in distant places. Aisha's journey had started with betrayal, humiliation, and grief. But now, it carried meaning far beyond revenge. Tand had been her fire, but she was her own phoenix. Back home in Ibadan, Rise Again expanded. Women who had been abandoned, mocked, or broken now stood as tailors, writers, chefs, and tech entrepreneurs. They didn't just survive, they transformed. Just like Aisha. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind her quiet garden, Aisha received a letter. It was from Tand. Not a love letter. Not even an apology. It was a confession. He admitted he had judged her through a lens shaped by society's shallowness. He said he envied her peace, her growth, and her courage. But most of all, he admitted something deeper: he had never really known her. He had only seen what his pride allowed. Aisha read it once. Then she folded it gently, placed it inside her journal under the page where she had once written, "This is war." She smiled. The war was over. Not because she had won against him, but because she had made peace with herself. In the end, Aisha didn't need to destroy Tand. Life had already taught him. And for her, success was never about vengeance, it was about becoming the kind of woman who needed no man's validation. A woman who saw scars not as shame, but as symbols. A woman who had the courage to rise, even when no one clapped for her. Now, the world clapped. But it was her own applause that mattered most. And the moral? Never underestimate someone who's been broken. Because sometimes, the deepest pain produces the brightest light. And when a woman heals herself, she heals generations.